Hey guys, so in this video we're going to talk about the breakdowner. If you're familiar with Maya, then you might know the breakdowner as the tween machine. But in my opinion, this is a better version of that. If you've never heard of a breakdowner and you're not used to Maya, the breakdowner is essentially a slide that helps you create in-betweens and extreme poses for your animation. You can access it here in the tool menu by pressing the breakdowner, or you can press Shift E and you get access to the breakdowner that way as well. This is probably the way most animators use it, by pressing Shift E. To use the breakdowner, you first need two keys so that the breakdowner can actually interplay between them. So here's pose 1 and here's pose 2. And this is just what the computer generates for the in-between. Now what you can do is, let's say on frame 5, we want the hand and the shoulder, chest, and the head. Now if we press Shift E, while we have our cursor on the viewport here, when we go left, the character's pose gets closer to our first key. If we go right, the character's pose gets closer to the key to the right. So in this case, frame 1 and frame 10. So the closer I go to the left side of the viewport, the closer we are to the pose on frame 1. The closer we go to the right side of the viewport, the closer we get to our pose on frame 10. So in this case, I would want the hand to be dragging behind a little bit. So I'm gonna have it a little bit farther to the left than the center of the viewport. You guys can see up there what the percentage is. So in this case, we're taking 20% of the pose on frame 10, and we're taking 80% of the pose on frame 1. So now I can left click to set keys on those controllers. And now we have the hand dragging behind on frame 5. Otherwise, this is what the pose would have looked like. And this is what we have. If you want your pose to be an exact in-between of your first pose and your second pose, you can have your cursor here in the center once you press Shift E, and you can make sure that the bar at the top is at 50%. This just means that it's borrowing equally from the pose on the left and equally from the pose on the right. Another cool feature of this tool is that you can actually go below 0% and over 100%, creating overshoots. And this is what I mean. Let's say right now we want the character to overshoot their pose. So I'm gonna go ahead and select all my controllers. I am going to change my key to frame 15, my last pose. I am gonna come to frame 11, let's say. And let's say this is the frame that I want to overshoot. So I'm going to press Shift E and then E again. And now when I drag to the right, as you guys can see in the above bar, we are past 100%. So now the character is overshooting. So I'm going to overshoot just by a little bit. Let's say 103%. And so the character is essentially following the action that they were doing a little bit farther than they would in the last frame. So now when we take a look at this, we have a little bit of overshoot and then settle. So the character brings their hand farther and then settles back upwards. So this could be super handy for a quick overshoot. This is something I found out recently as well, which is pretty crazy because I've been using Blender for 2 years and you're just always finding new things. So like many other things in Blender, you can actually lock the breakdowner to a specific function. Now what I mean by that is that you can press Shift E to enable the breakdowner, and then you can press G to only affect the translation of the selected bones. In this case, Blender will leave any rotation and scale intact. You can see all the locking options in the text info in the bottom of the screen. And as we know, G refers to location, R is rotation, and S is scale. We have two other options here, B and C. B refers to bendy bones and C to custom properties, which can be found in the channel box if the selected controller has any. For example, custom properties would be an option like this on Max's hair, where you have the option to disable the hair. This would be a custom property which you can only focus by pressing C. So we're about to get even crazier. You can lock the breakdowner to an axis. So let's say you want the selected controllers that we have here move along the Z axis only. So what you can do is press Shift E, G to only select the move options, and then press Z. And now we've locked everything else out, and when we scrub left and right, all our controllers only translate from the Z values of frame 1 and frame 10. We're just going in between the Z values of the translate of these two keys and nothing else. And you can get even crazier. So if you know the exact value you want to borrow, let's say 70%, you can press Shift E, G to only focus the move options, and then Z to only focus the Z translate of the move options, and then type in 70. And now you borrowed 70% of the pose to the right. Of course, you don't have to lock anything. You can just do this without locking, so you can press Shift E to enable the breakdowner, and then just press 90, for example. And that way you borrow 90% of the pose to the right to have a nice ease out, for example. When I use this tool, I usually just press Shift E. Occasionally I press G, R, and S to just lock a specific thing. But I don't type in any specific numbers. I just scrub left and right to see the pose I want to create visually. This is just to show you what's possible. When you click and hold the breakdowner inside the tool menu, you'll also find push and relax. These options are quite clunky and not always predictable, so you're better off just using the default option, in my opinion, at least until the developers make some improvements. So knowing everything we've talked about, let's try and create this in between right here. So I'm going to select the chest, the head, and the neck, let's say, and also the shoulder, the elbow control, and the wrist right here. And now I'm going to press Shift E and borrow against my pose on frame 1 by moving my cursor to the left side of the viewport. There we go. Let's say I just want the head. Here I'm going to borrow more towards my pose 1, so the head is farther back. And for the wrist, actually let's press Shift E and then R. And this way we're just borrowing the rotation of the wrist, and I want the wrist to be more rotated backwards, just so there's a little bit of drag on the arm. And now we have something like this. There you go. So this pretty much covers everything with regards to how the breakdowner is used from the technical perspective. If you need help understanding how to properly implement the breakdowner in your animation workflow, we'll have a video in the intermediate lectures of the animation course to explain the best practices when using this tool to better streamline your workflow. Thank you for watching.